Welcome to the Sociology 299 series on using SPSS. In this video, we are going to examine a data set and understand the difference between data view and variable view, and I'll talk to you a little bit about navigating the menus within SPSS. So I have a data set open here, and I am in the data view, so each column is headed by the name of the variable, and these are individual cases. In data view, you can enter data and you can change data. In general, that's not something you're going to do very often, but it can happen. But what you do not do are calculations and transformations and changes directly in here, like you would in a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, or Google Sheets, or something like that. Instead, this just allows you to view it and, as I said, edit or input. The variable view tab here allows us to get a lot more information about each of our variables. So this is where you're starting to see how much this really differs from a spreadsheet, because there's a lot of this additional data, or sometimes called metadata, data about data. So this is the name of our variable, year. We know that it's numeric. It takes up 4 characters. It has no decimals. I have a larger label for it. I can expand that so I can see it there. The label allows you to understand what the shorter variable name means. In older versions of SPSS, you could only have 8 characters here, which meant oftentimes you start to have some variables like these here in which you can't tell what those really are. Some of these are pretty obvious. Year, ID, age, sex, race. These all tend to make sense. But labels help us understand, and you can choose to have either the variable name or the label in your output, in the tables and graphs that you create for output. Values tell you what kind of information lives inside of this. So in this case, it's a numeric, it's a year, it's kind of self-explanatory, so we don't need value labels. These are basically labels for the various things. Same with respondent ID, but for marital status, we need to know what those numbers refer to. So I simply clicked on it, and that allows me to see this: married, widowed, divorced, separated, never married. This also allows me to make changes if I needed to, adding in a new value if I had to, or something like that. This is good when you are entering data, when you're creating new variables. It's not a good place if you wanted to, for instance, create a new category that was, ever been married, and then another category, never been married, and split these up into those two. That's where we want to work with our data and our recoding options as opposed to doing it here. This is more for data entry, or if you've opened up some data that is not defined, and that's what it means when you put in all of this metadata, then this is a window in which you can do that definition. Missing refers to what values mean that the data was missing, because sometimes a blank doesn't give you enough information about whether or not a data is missing. But as you can imagine, particularly for something that is a continuous variable, you would need to define what's missing so that it was not involved in any of your calculations. And you might be thinking, hey, something like marital status or sex or race, those aren't numerical variables, those are categories. And that is true, but in a lot of data sets, including this, a subset of the General Social Survey, those are given numerical designations with then a categorical label so that certain types of analyses can be more easily performed with them. But yes, it makes no sense to determine the average of marital status, but it would be important to know that there was a missing value. SPSS, when you have classified something as missing, knows to not include it in any calculations. These other things you can kind of ignore. It lets you understand whether these are nominal, ordinal, scale, categorical, other things like that that we will discuss in class when we talk about types of variables in more detail. Mostly you're just interested in the names and the values. So that's navigating the variable view. Back in the data view, obviously, if I wanted to add more cases, I'd scroll all the way down and add more cases. if I wanted to data enter a new variable, I would scroll over here and enter that variable. SPSS uses menus like a lot of software does. The file menu handles things like opening and saving, printing, stuff like that. The edit can help you edit your data view here, so inserting new variables or new cases into a spot or replacing things. View, you're never going to use that. Here's where you kind of deal with the data itself if you want to do some definitions, sorting variables, sorting cases, sorting variables, transposing, that means flipping your variables for your cases. Doesn't make a lot of sense in this data set, but it can in some others. Merging files together in which you have two different files and you want to smush them into one. Aggregating, where you want to say create a new data set in which you only have, like in this particular data set, perhaps we have some information about the geographic location of each respondent, and we want to change our data set into one in which the unit of analysis is a geographic location, and so we want to create means or other measures of central tendency. That's aggregating, so changing our unit of analysis. Perhaps we want to split our file up so that we're performing analyses on only one set or another of cases. Things like that. That all happens within data. Transform is where we create new variables, recoding into new variables or different variables, or the same one. Some of these other things you're never really going to deal with. Analyze, here are our statistics, and as the semester progresses you'll understand what more of these things mean. Descriptive statistics is where we're going to start, and this allows us to do our analyses. Graphs allow us to create graphs. Utilities you're probably not really going to ever mess with, likewise extensions, unlikely to deal with any of those. So it's really going to be data, transform, analyze, and graphs that you're going to be spending time with here in SPSS. Almost everything we do in SPSS revolves around taking a menu, finding what you want to do, clicking on it, and then doing something inside of a dialog box where we select the variables that we're interested in, move them over into our, these are variables I'm going to do stuff with, and then click through the various buttons to make our choices. What statistics do we want to hear? Mean, median, mode, sum. Doesn't make a lot of sense for a categorical variable, but sure, I'll say mean. Continue. Do I want any charts? Yeah, sure, I'll do a pie chart. I hate pie charts, but let's do one anyway. Format. This, again, doesn't make sense with only a couple of categories of output here, but, you know, you've got all these options, and then you can just say OK to go, and it puts our output into our output window here. So again, I've got some more syntax here. This is the code for everything we just did with menus. Back in the olden days, when we walked uphill in the snow to school every day, you didn't use menus in SPSS. It was entirely code-based, and so you had to know the code structure and the codes themselves, this syntax for asking what to do. Sometimes it is actually faster to do things in syntax than with menus, but I'm not going to expect any syntax work from you this semester. Frequencies, variables, sex, I want the mean, a pie chart in the order of the analysis. So here we go. First it tells us how many variables how many cases we have, how many are missing, and what our mean is. And then here it's doing a frequencies, both the frequency, the percent, valid percent, which means the percent out of only real cases, not missing values. There aren't any missing values here, so it doesn't matter, but if you had like 20% missing values, it would mess up some of this. Cumulative percent. And here's our pie chart, which is a really lame pie chart, but you know, it's pretty. And that is basically how SPSS functions.